So again, my name's Susan Heisey. I own a school group called the Institute of Beauty and Wellness. We have three beauty schools in Milwaukee, Madison, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois. And today there are two guests, Ed Cramp from Duane Morris, who is a leading advocate for the industry in Washington, D.C., and Ryan Claybaugh, who has been very active in speaking on behalf of school owners and trying to help the government understand beauty schools and how the legislation could harm the industry and its growth moving forward, potentially if the ruling stays as it currently is listed. So with that being said, we're going to get started. And, Ed, if you don't mind, kind of just going into what is being proposed from gainful employment perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Susan. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's great to be able to talk with folks about this, especially with you and Ryan, obviously also a great friend and client of the firm. So Ryan, great to see you. So hi, everybody. So let's talk a little bit, we'll just level set for a moment on kind of where we are to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So for a very long time, more than, well, close to 20 years now, we have been talking about the gainful employment regulation. And this was a regulation that came about out of statute. It was first expanded by the Obama administration, who took these two words that reside in the Higher Education Opportunity Act that say that proprietary colleges and programs that lead to undergraduate certificate programs have to lead to gainful employment in a recognized occupation. And for many, many years, in fact, forever, that was meant kind of a job that pays money without kind of digging deeper than that. What the Obama administration did was propose a new approach to the words gainful employment, which turned it into a metric to compare in one version of the rule the earnings of students against the amount of debt that they were receiving, in another version the earnings of students against the average earnings of a high school graduate in the state in which they graduated from. And it has kind of evolved over time. There have been many, many lawsuits, some of which I've been involved in, some of which have been successful, some have not been, and one of which is still pending currently in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Louisiana. But the bottom line is that people have been pushing for this for a very long time. And the idea is that there ought to be some kind of accountability on the part of institutions for the programs they offer that looks at not just the inputs that go into the education that they are providing, but also looks at the output. In other words, what are students getting from the education when they complete a program? And so the latest iteration of this rule, which is currently being considered at the Department of Education, actually came from the current Congress it was part of what's called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which you all probably have heard of. It was signed by the president July 4th last year, and much flourish, as is the case. And within that rule, there was an expansion of the traditional gainful employment concept to all of higher education. So we're no longer really talking about the gainful employment rule anymore. We're now talking about a new rule, which was expressly dictated by Congress or requested by Congress through legislation. Now, that rule, which when it was in Congress was kind of affectionately known as the do no harm rule, came out of the Senate and was adopted as part of the reconciliation process between the houses and signed by the president. And what it does is it creates a simplified rule that applies to all of higher ed, where when a student graduates from a program, any program, whether it is a certificate program at the undergraduate level, a bachelor's degree program, or even a post-bachelor's or graduate degree program, their outcomes will be compared against, in the case of certificate programs and bachelor degree programs, compared against high school graduates. And in the case of graduate earnings or graduate programs, they'll be compared against bachelor degree earnings. The thought is not arguing in favor of this, but the concept here is that golly gee, if somebody goes to college even a little bit, then they ought to make more money coming out of their program than if they had never gone to college at all. So they take the earnings of a cohort or a group of students who graduate at the same time from a program, and they figure out what the median, that is the middle number, not the average, but the middle number of earnings are in that group. They exclude anyone who earns $0 or who didn't complete the program. And then they take that number and they compare it against the average earnings of high school graduates in the state where they graduated from. There are some exceptions around the edges there, which I won't go into for the purposes of this webinar, but that's the basic idea. Now, some of the key, there are lots and lots of problems with this concept. It sounds lovely. It sounds like a great selling point, I think, coming from politicians and policymakers in Washington. But the fact is that there are a lot of nuances that happen in education, and much of that is really ignored by this rule, this proposed rule. And one, so just procedurally where we are right now is that there was a negotiated rulemaking which took place in December and then again in January, which Ryan was a part of. Thank you, Ryan, again, for your service as an alternate negotiator there. And the negotiating committee reached consensus around this rule, which means that the department published the proposed rule in the form that it was negotiated over. We're currently in what's called the public comment period for the rule. So that's a 30-day period. It's going to end on May 25th, I believe, if I'm not incorrect.
May
I think
May
it's the
20th.
20th.
May 20th. Okay, thank you. So coming up real quick here, just in 2 weeks. And at the close of that 30-day period, the department will review the comments from the public and then publish the final rule. It is really the only opportunity for the public to comment on this rule before it becomes final. And I think it is really, really, really important. I would add another really, really, really on top of the three I already added there to talk about how important it is to hear from the public. That would be schools, students, prospective students, employers, people who want to have good haircuts by people who are properly trained, to provide comment, because this rule is predicted to put out of business 93% of cosmetology, barbering, and beauty and wellness programs across the country. 93% may sound like a lot, but there are actually other programs that fail at higher levels, undergraduate certificates in English, social working programs, and many religious studies programs, among others. Massage therapy fails at a higher level. So we are really looking at a dramatic change in the way that the higher ed landscape looks for this sector. What does this mean in practice? In practice, what it means is that the institutions that offer these programs will no longer be able to give federal student aid funds to their students, which means that the students won't have money to be able to pay for going to beauty school or barbering school or massage school. And that means if they don't have any money to attend, then the schools will basically close. Now, this is not a problem in other parts of higher education. So if you think about, your local community college or your state college, or even other kinds of proprietary institutions, they typically have lots and lots and lots of programs that offer a variety of subjects to students. Those institutions are going to be fine. They're going to lose some of these programs. They're going to lose most of these programs, if not all of them, but the institutions will go on. In beauty and wellness, the schools are going to close, and they're going to close en masse, and it's going to happen in 2 years. So the first round of failures is going to come out in January of next year. The first program failures will be official in July of 2027, and then the second failures will be announced in July of 2028. There is no effective appeal from a determination that a program is failing. So once the department makes that determination, then that's the end of it. So one of the major problems beyond there being no appeal at all is the way that the rule measures earnings. So what it does is the department is going to go to the IRS, and they are going to capture, based on Social Security numbers of who was enrolled in the programs, the reported earnings of graduates from the programs. And so I'm sure that all of you are immediately thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense because of the high number of cash tips that our graduates receive. And my response to that is, I agree. And in fact, the government agrees that this earnings data is flawed, seriously flawed. But they're saying that this is the best data that they have available. So it is, unfortunately, they're just kind of on this path right now. And I think it's very important for them to hear from all of you how much this is going to impact your communities, your students, your businesses, so that they can make some changes. Some of you may be wondering, by the way, on this tip issue, well, golly gee, didn't we also pass as a part of the One Big Beautiful Bill a tip income exemption of $25,000? And wouldn't that be important to know before, what impact that has on tax reporting or tip reporting before we go down this road? And I agree, it would be important to know, and it would be lovely if the Department of Education would give time to allow for the new rules from IRS to take effect to encourage people to report tips. Some of you may know this, but the IRS actually had not updated its forms in time for the tax season last year. And so, as employers, for those of you who are W-2 employers, if your employees receive tips, basically you were told to estimate the tips because there was no block to report tips for employers. And for those who are on 1099s or who have their own businesses, they were encouraged to self-report tips, and there would be an exclusion up to $25,000. But again, the tax forms were not updated in time. And so the first year of data that the department is going to capture, we think is going to be even more flawed this year because they will not be capturing all of the tip income that they might in years going forward. So that's just one of many, many problems with the rules. Ryan, I'm sure, can go on at great length about all of those as well. But the bottom line is programs are going to close, schools are not going to go to, or students are not going to go to school. We're not going to have a workforce moving forward that is replenished at the rate that it currently is, unless something changes. So, Susan, is that a fair summary? Is there anything
I
else you'd
think
like me
that's
to dive into in more depth?
I think that's a great overview. I think, what this gainful employment is going to do for the school industry is it's going to have to change a bit of our business model, right?
Agreed.
And that
Absolutely.
because we're 1,500 hours or more, depending on some states, or less in some states, the cost of education greatly differs. Not that this is based on the old rule, but I think that lowering the amount of hours will allow the programs to be more cost effective. That may then make it easier for someone to pay out of pocket for their education in lieu of funding not being available, potentially as the years go by. I did not even know that last statement that you made, which was basically that the forms were not updated.
Right.
And that's going to be a huge issue, for us in the first year of reporting, for sure. So thanks again for sharing, Ed.
Sure.
For Ryan, and then we'll get to Q&A certainly as well. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing to help advocate, for school owners and what you've been hearing from, legislatures.
Yeah, no, thanks, Susan. Thanks for letting me be part of this. So yeah, so there is it's quite a there's quite a few groups out there, you know, trying to educate the persons who put this rule into place. I want to stress that the schools are not against accountability. So I don't think they're trying to be exempt from anything as far as, I think we all believe in accountability. If anything, as a taxpayer, I appreciate the effort being made to watch our tax dollars. But the challenge here again is the test just that's being applied here does not equate to the realities of the beauty industry. I asked someone the other day, I'm like, if I created a test and 93% of my students failed that test, is that the student's fault or is that a problem with the test? I'm like, that's probably a problem with the test. So the test probably needs to be updated. And so with that said, there's I would say there's 7 or 8 different groups around the country, mostly made up of beauty school owners. We've got the American Association of Career Schools, which is mostly a group of, is kind of the National Association of Cosmetology Schools. And, they're doing a lot of advocacy. They're doing a lot of lobbying efforts. So I'm with I'm actually with Paul Mitchell Schools is where I live. And so we're doing some advocacy. We have a lobbying firm that we're working with as well. There's other groups around the country, and in my opinion, while it would be great, I guess, if we were all one united, kind of doing this together, with the time frame we had to kind of go against this, it would have been tough to organize that quickly. But to be honest, I don't mind the approach we're taking because we've all got our strengths, we've all got our arguments, and we've all got different contacts within the government, within Washington, and so it's allowed all of us to kind of take a different approach. We all have the same arguments, which Ed, showed earlier with the intricacies of the beauty industry being a very flexible, very part-time, a tip-heavy industry. Those things. And so I should probably get an apartment in Washington, D.C. at this point, because I think I've been out there every month this year so far. And again, it's just meeting with different lawmakers, members of Congress, educating them, trying to get their support. There has been some movement. The Representative Gozar out of Arizona kind of kicked things off, where he drafted a letter that was signed, I believe, by about 8 other members of Congress, and that was sent to the Department of Education. Just yesterday, Congressman Burgess Owens from Utah, he also drafted a letter, and his letter carries a little bit more weight because he is on the Education and Workforce Committee. And his letter was signed, I believe, by about 16 or 17 other members of Congress, and a lot of those were also on the Workforce and Education Committee. So we're hoping that letter will, and this letter is basically, it's asking them, the Department of Ed, hey, let's take a deeper dive into this rule you're putting out, because you're going to decimate an industry here. If you look at the beauty industry as a whole, I think I read a report, it's supposed to be $106 billion industry in 2026 and we employ 1.3 million people. And so it's a juggernaut. It's an economy in itself with the United States. And it's something we need to address. If you really want me to go down the bad rabbit hole of, they cut off our workforce, and again, I've seen studies where 75% of students who get their certificates in beauty attend a school, or they utilize Title IV or federal student aid in order to get their licenses. And so now, if we cut that if we eliminate 75% of the opportunity for people to get their certificates, it's going to put a major strain on the workforce. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the beauty and wellness industry is expected to grow 5 to 8% each year the next 10 years. So it's not a dwindling industry; it's a growing industry. And so we definitely need everybody's help. Do you want me to go through this? How to make a comment?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Ryan.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know where this QR code takes you, but I'm assuming it takes you to the right place. But the idea is go to regulations.gov or click directly on the link. There's a button that says submit your comment. There's also additional areas where you can put your information, your name. I mean, you can comment anonymously, but it's recommended that they put more. There's more credibility if you actually put your name down. And I promise nobody's going to come to your house and check on you. So we do encourage you to not submit anonymously. If you want to submit as an individual, that's great. As an organization, whatever you'd like. But again, there's different talking points. But at the end of the day, the best thing is just to tell your story. Personal stories, personal comments are the best. And so, tell your story of what the beauty industry has done for you, what it's doing for your family, what it's done for your clientele. Talk about how flexible it is. Lots of different talking points that just talk about your experience in the beauty industry. Talk about if this rule goes through, how that'll affect your business, how that'll affect your life basically. And so that's what we need. We need a lot of comments. So last I checked, we were only
Didn't
about
legislation say that we needed more, somewhere near 100,000 comments, Ryan?
that's the goal.
Yeah.
The nursing industry, they got affected by a rule recently as well, and I heard they made 80,000 comments. And we did hear from the Department of Ed on that they said, hey, they became such a squeaky wheel, we had to kind of take some, because we had to take what they were asking for under serious consideration. And so our goal is if we can get 100,000, that'll make us 2 or 3 squeaky wheels, is our hope. And so again, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to make a comment. I don't think you don't need to be a great writer. Just tell your story and submit a comment that this rule will be terrible for the beauty industry.
Mhm.
Can I just weigh in here just a little bit, Susan, if you don't mind?
Please.
Yeah, some things that the department has expressed a lot of concern about is they are worried about the possibility that this rule will create education deserts in certain areas in the country, in particular occupations. And so uh, the reason it may do this is that in states with large urban cores, like Wisconsin or Minnesota or Illinois or almost every other state, there is a big disparity between the wages earned by individuals in the urban centers and those earned in the rural communities. And for institutions that are located in rural communities where they are supporting those communities by helping educate the local workforce and supporting local economy, those schools are going to close at a higher rate than those located at the urban cores because their students earn less relative to the high school earnings average in the state. There are alternate ways to measure that. So, for example, the measurement that the department proposes to use is called the American Communities Survey, and it is a statewide high school earnings threshold. There is a different one that's used by the Department of Labor that is regional and looks at the regional differences in wages. So it is our experience when we look at the data that when you compare apples to apples, so suburban, no, rural, there we go, one of those. When you compare rural graduates against rural high school earners, you find that graduates in these programs are actually much more successful than when compared against their statewide peers. So highlighting, you don't have to get into all that detail, but if you can tell the department, hey, I've got a school located in this area, if we go out of business, which we will if this rule passes, there will not be another opportunity to learn how to become a hairdresser for 600 miles, 500 miles, 200 miles. So we're aware of one area in the center of the country where it's going to be almost 800 miles between cosmetology schools if one school closes, which it's likely to do. So that kind of thing is important. I mean, those are core Republican voters. And so I think it's important for this Republican administration to hear the harm that they will be inflicting on their core constituency.
Duly noted, and I believe most of the legislation has to do with full-time, team members' income. And again, we know from the professional salon industry, the average service provider is not working or working close to 30 hours, not 40 hours. And this is why their gross income next to what a high school, it just is, the amount of hours they work matters, and that the industry, as you guys saw on the slide earlier, 85% of the industry typically are women who are caregivers. And again, how it unfairly, puts extra, demand on on a female, more so as well. So there's another slide here, Ryan, that you might want to add a comment to, which is what to include in your letter. I think you guys are both giving some great examples. There are school owners directors of schools that are on the call. And I think, I don't know that the directors of schools understand the importance of their communication and getting the word out to salon owners, to their students, to graduates, to help them understand, you know, what exactly should be in the comment that goes to education, you know, to the government.
Yeah, I can share a little bit more on that. I do want to say one, a couple things. I'm glad to hear we have some schools on this call as well. And, I've talked to some school owners or administrators and they're, I've asked them, hey, you need to ask your students to make comments as well. And they're a little leery. They're like, well, I don't want to tell my students about this because it's going to freak them out. And I'm like, well, and I go, well, just remember that this isn't immediate because sometimes you tell students, you're going to lose aid if you don't make a comment. And again, this is 2 years away, so it's not, it shouldn't affect your current students, but it will definitely affect the future students. And so if you can remember that point when you ask students to comment, that'll help at least relieve some of their concern that this is going to happen immediately and happen to them, where it's really we're asking them to save the future students. And again, some other ideas on what to include in your comment. And I'll probably repeat myself, but just who you are and what is your role in the beauty industry. Share your story on the first 4 years in the industry. That's what this rule equates, is it looks at the income level of a graduate 4 years after graduation. And I think many on this call know it takes a long time to build a clientele. And some can do it in 1 to 4 years, some it takes a little bit longer. And so I think if you're able to share your story the first 4 years, I think that's important. You should, talk about, do you intentionally work part-time or flexible hours, and provide the why. If you're a salon owner, talk about how as the owner of the salon, you have to offer flexible work or you can't get anyone to work at your salon. Talk about what the realities of beauty careers, what is the metric miss? And again, we talked about part-time tips, the time it takes to build clientele. You've got booth rental, you've got self-employment income. There's a lot of different realities that the beauty industry has. Again, what's the impact this will have on the industry, the students, and local communities? Ed brought up the rural communities, which is definitely, I've heard them they're going to be called beauty deserts. And so, these small towns, they may lose their they might not just lose schools, they may lose their beauty salons and shops as well. And then you can also talk about, how does this proposed rule unfairly penalize a female-dominated profession? And again, I encourage you, be honest, be personal, and be polite. And again, use your real life story because that's going to be much more powerful than any statistic.
For sure. I talked to a school owner yesterday who has 5 institutes and has no plans to talk to their salon owners who come to career fairs, right? Who's not talking to any of their clients who are coming to receive discounted services, who will not potentially be able to get those services as well. And just to graduates to say, when you do graduate, you have to now be more mindful. And we know our graduates have loved our programs that we've provided, that it successfully launched them into the industry. But now you need to be mindful of where you work after you graduate, and that it will help to meet the needs of, the legislation. And so to make sure they're informed, I'm not surprised, Ryan, that some school owners don't want to bring it up, but it's a reality we're all facing. And I think the more that, we talk about it with the community and how it will impact the industry. Granted, I think we all know there are different ways to enter the industry, right? You can do an apprenticeship program, but apprenticeship programs are long and arduous. And current statistics have been 6 to 7 out of 10 who start an apprenticeship program don't finish an apprenticeship program because they're not paid well. The training sometimes is not what, you know, is rigorous as it would be doing the clients back to back, getting all of the, you know, the hands-on experience needed to get the confidence to be able to do that. And so this is an example of a program that we currently have offered really over the last, oh God, this program's from like 2015. So really the last 10, 12 years, we've been educating our students. We do a student assembly a year specifically on gainful employment. We come in twice a year and talk to all of the students who've taken out, so gainful employment is the first piece. We talk to the students and salon owners when they come to career fairs. We talk about, you know, sort of the full service experience for a student who starts in beauty school, graduates, needs licensure, needs employment, employment verification, the job training, the income pay, made, documented, pays the taxes, and now, you know, we have to watch, you know, how they're gainfully employed for 4 years, right? You know, after graduation. Just example of career fairs and, you know, European Wax, who I chatted with last weekend at ISBN, was like, I don't know what we would do if we didn't have our, you know, skincare, you know, schools, our beauty schools nearby, because, you know, our franchise would be at risk. We need constant estheticians, you know, coming into our business, and they do very well financially. So again, just an example of how we do 4 career fairs a year versus 2, which I think is what the average cosmetology school does. Again, it's about getting them jobs before they graduate and helping students have good conversations with employers about the economic need upon graduation as well. We do 2 programs a year on understanding financial aid and making sure that our students, when they graduate, understand how you pay back financial aid so that schools have low default rates in this industry. And ultimately helping students budget accordingly, you know, so that, you know, based on, you know, whatever Title IV funding was provided, you know, they understand in 6 months after graduation, they'll be starting to pay it back. And again, the financial education being provided in cosmetology and esthetology schools, I think really being important in order to, you know, provide the full experience that today's graduates need to be successful in the beauty industry. Again, just talking about loan repayment based on what they're borrowing. This would change across the country, but helping students to understand what the monthly payment would be, and just to make sure that those who are graduating are fully prepared for this. So our estimates is around 36,000 that a graduate needs to make in the state of Wisconsin, which is full-time hours, or 22,000 hours a year, which would equal about $17.50 an hour. So for the most current updated information for us, for gainfully employed graduates, we'll be educating our students on this number. So they, you know, we don't have a $15 an hour minimum. Our minimum wage is like $7.40 or $7.80 or something. I don't know a single salon who pays you know, someone in training that low. However, based on gainful employment, the new number that I'm in the professional salon industry as well, we'll be looking at, you know, paying our team, new talent in training now, almost $18 an hour during training. So it's going to raise the cost of our haircuts to our consumers in order to be able to pay our hairdressers, $17.54 an hour, so that in their first year after graduation, they're hitting 36,000. So I think schools need to work with salons and stylists in order to understand how the gainful employment will affect the economics in salons. And this, I think, is the conversation that can help salon owners go like, I can't afford this. I don't know that my market will bear a $60 haircut. Well, that's what graduates will be headed toward. They'll have to be headed towards this in order to be considered gainfully employed. Now, what percentage of this 36,000 annually can come from gratuities? Of course, a good portion, on average, 15-20% is typically gratuities. However, the rest is paid by the salon, and that will move the cost of haircuts and things up. So I just wanted to hit, and again, this is my information based on the state of Wisconsin, based on our institutes. And so every school will have to do their own calculations based on the hours required and so forth. But this is currently where our calculations are for the state of Wisconsin. We have 3 schools. Chicago passes right away. Their cost of haircuts are higher, right? The other 2 schools are only $500 and $1,000 under from passing. So we believe with the right education, our institutes can get to full pass rate. But again, to Ed's point earlier, if the form isn't even filled out accurately without that tipping information being included in your tax forms for 2025, that already sets us back significantly. And I hope they do consider that, as we move forward. So with that being said, it's kind of an open forum for discussion. So if anyone does have any questions for either Ed or Ryan, or myself, we're happy to answer them at this time. But the objective of today's call was to have a better understanding for school owners and directors. I know a lot of the school owners are aware, but I don't know how much the directors are aware. And hopefully we're going to inspire you to take action, to make comments. And if you can share any content from this call, I'm doing another call next Wednesday at the same time with salon owners, graduates, influencers in the industry to encourage them to comment on the legislation and get the word out. There's a lot of influencers in this industry who have, Ashley Norman, right? 200,000 plus consumers who watch her work, and a lot of them are hairdressers. I think these influencers could really help get the word out and get us, Ryan, to that 80,000, 100,000 comment level. Claudia Fabian, she's the beauty debut. She's got almost 300,000 followers. And again, I think consumers care that industries that support women and the flexibility could be greatly impacted because we don't work full-time hours, right? Don't make that full income. So any questions from anyone in the on the webinar today?
Susan, this is Ellen. I just wanted to add to the chain of communication of getting the word out there, as you know, is on our Aveda Salon call. Edwin and I believe yourself or you helped support in that action to get the word out that way. So, 4 times 4 ways in any way we can support, but I just wanted to mention it to the group.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ellen. So next Monday, the 11th, is salon owner, school owner for Aveda. And Edwin Neal will be speaking on that call to ask, and I mean, Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you get over like 4,000 people in attendance at some of these calls. So huge
It
reach.
definitely ranges, but for if for the audience today and is pass the word, join the calls. There's lots of information, and this particular topic on the call is very, very important. So get your owners, your leadership, managers, what have you, directors of school. Just the more in attendance, the better.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Ellen, for carving out time in that call in order to help inspire salon owners to then talk to their teams, obviously faculty that are in schools, students that are currently in schools. You know, I know that they love what we do for them. It might be a little painful at time when they hit that tipping point, during growth and development, but no doubt greatly impacts them and they see the great value, years to come after graduation. Thanks, Ellen. Any other questions or comments?
I have a quick question. I'm assuming unlicensed folks are able to go in and also submit public comment. Just wanted to confirm that.
Good question, Brittany. Ryan, Ed, do you have to be licensed to comment?
No,
No.
anyone can comment.
No, you just have to have a pulse, so.
Yeah, I just commented, and you have a choice to say if you're speaking on behalf of an organization or an individual. So, and then if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, which organization are you speaking on behalf of? So it gives you that option.
Yeah,
Awesome,
and
thank you.
I think really whether someone chooses individual or corporate, I think is key. And I think consumers who would be impacted by driving costs up in hair salons because of the impact of gainful employment should speak up, especially if they're in rural areas. For sure, because they will be impacted if they were accustomed to a $30 haircut, which is not too uncommon in rural areas. Yeah, that's great. Any other comments?
I have a question. Is it more impactful to comment for an organization or independently?
Does it have weight?
I think both are valued. It depends on what the comment is, but I mean, speaking to the part-time worker issue, that Susan mentioned earlier, which I think is so critically important. If you're an individual salon operator or booth renter or what have you, talking about the flexibility that gives you and the choice that you've made to work on a part-time basis and why that's important to you and your family and how that supports you, that would be valuable. If you're speaking from an organization, giving information, on an anonymized basis, not the commenter being anonymous, but what I mean is surveying your organization, looking at who your part-time workers are and saying, hey, on a part-time basis, our folks earn $30,000 a year, but on a full-time basis, they would earn $75,000 a year. So, pointing out those kinds of like hard facts to the department are important. To give you a sense of it, they have come to the table with kind of what I would describe stereotypical, Washington, D.C., ivory tower, think tank type of stuff. And it's just out of touch with, what's happening out in the real world. So the more that you can give real world stories about how this is going to impact, the department really wants to hear that. It gives them the information they need in order to make rules that are better informed. But without that information, they're stuck with what the think tanks are telling them, and they're not always getting the right story, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
That's great.
I And it is okay if you want to do a personal comment and also if you represent an organization to do another comment that way. I believe you can do that. So,
Good.
that's what I plan on doing is I'm going to comment from an organization and then I'll submit a comment personally as well. So,
Yeah, I would resist the urge to have people do kind of fill in the blank form comments. That's not helpful. You're better to just encourage people to just write a short, doesn't have to be a lot of information. Um, quick anecdote out in California, there was a rule adopted a couple years ago. The agency took a complete U-turn on an issue because they got one comment from one institution that pointed out an issue they had not thought about. So these can be very powerful if they are done in the right way.
Great. Well,
I also, if you want to look, I put if you're not aware of this issue and it's a lot to stomach and we've got months into this, so we understand it, but I put a link to a video that it's just a 6-minute video. If you want to link to that and you're trying to explain the challenge to somebody else, sometimes just having them watch this video might help them understand the issue and inspire them to make a comment. So I put that in the chat if you want to click on that. So
excellent. Thanks,
And
Ryan.
AI comments are welcome, by the way. So take advantage of those systems and use them. Just have a conversation with your chatbot and say what your situation is, that you want to comment on the AHEAD, AHEAD rule making, and it'll help you. So
one thing you want to avoid though is, if you have this great comment you wrote and you're like, you copy and share it with 20 other people and they post the exact same comment.
right.
The department has their own version of AI that'll
Right.
consolidate that into one comment. So, so just be aware of
Form
what you copy and
letters.
paste. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
appreciated.
no form letters.
Okay, good to note. Well, obviously, everyone here probably knows at least 10 people who would be more than happy to go make comments. So any social content that you could put out to advocate and click the link for people to make comments. Most of us probably have at least 100 friends socially. And so by just popping it there, maybe 10% of people who follow you socially might go through and click the link and make comments. And I think, if you have any personal connections to other hairdressers and, I know some people here have connections to a couple hundred people who work in a company. Right? So how do we get that communication out to all of those service providers, retail store team members to take the opportunity to comment? Is much appreciated. So thanks again, Ed and Ryan, for being on today's call. I really appreciate it. I hope for everyone here, you got a little bit more clarity in how to take action. And next week, same time, I'll be hosting salon owners and stylists and influencers in order to invite all of our past graduates back to a call to encourage them to go out and comment, and encourage them to stay engaged, claim their income, and be proud to be part of this industry, as we all are. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Very much appreciate Ed and Ryan, your time. And thank you to everyone else for being here. Wishing you all well.